All right. Today, I am joined by Andrew Norden, an investment advisor with Meridian Wealth Management. Andrew spent nearly 20 years in medical device sales before shifting into wealth management, where he spent the last 11 years helping clients take control of their financial futures. With his unique perspective on the medical device lifestyle, Andrew is passionate about guiding professionals through retirement planning and smart financial decisions. He splits his time between Lexington, Kentucky and Naples, Florida, and enjoys golf, reading, and life with his wife and their 6 dogs. Andrew, welcome to the Chase MedSearch podcast.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to have you on. Part of the reason that I even do this podcast is I like interviewing friends, and we've been friends for a long time. And I wanted to reconnect with you. You reached out to me actually a couple months ago about what you've been up to and what you've been doing, and it just sounded like it would bring a lot of value to our audience. So I'm excited to have you on. Let's get started. For our audience,
Okay.
you have the bona fides. You were a top medical device sales rep. You became a medical device sales manager. Give us a synopsis of your career before you transitioned into wealth management, if you would.
Okay. Yeah, I got a biology degree out of college. Thought I was going to be a doctor, and to quote Animal House, "Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son." So that didn't work out, and so I actually had been working third shift at a gas station when I was in college, and the guy that I was working for gave me a job selling insurance. That had led to a few years of that. Then I got into pharma for a cup of coffee, and then into med device with a distributorship out of Cleveland, Ohio, called Clinical Technology. I sold anesthesia products, pain management products, nucleoplasty, RF, vertebroplasty, things like that. That led into going with ANS, Advanced Neuromodulation Systems, which you are familiar with, which was a great company. Loved it. It was just us and Medtronic in the neuromodulation space at that point. Had a great time there. St. Jude bought us, which was not a bad thing. They infused a bunch of capital into what we were doing, and we created some new products, and um, it was fun. And then all of a sudden, Boston Scientific, or at that point, Advanced Bionics, came out with a rechargeable battery that nobody saw coming. And, stayed there for a good long time, had a great time at St. Jude ANS. And
One
then,
President's Club, I'll interject.
yeah, I won several President's Clubs there. And it was interesting that that territory, um, when I took the job, I had no clue that we were basically less than zero in regard to market share, because there was a gentleman who has since passed. He was a KOL in the industry, and he couldn't stand our organization, some past issues, and so he was training every pain management physician in this area, and had poisoned the waters for us, and it was interesting. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, was launching a territory from zero. Actually, again, I say negative, and growing it to respectability, we'll say. I had a great time. It was hardest thing I've ever done again. And then as I transitioned out of that, I did spend a few years with a kind of a smaller organization that you're familiar with called
Very
Flowonics,
familiar.
which was an interthecal drug pump. And I did I was a rep for Tim Deere over in West Virginia, and we did some work here in Kentucky as well, and climbed the ladder there into the regional manager role. And I really got tired of spending my life on a regional jet.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and made the
I
switch.
want to take issue with you saying that St. Jude was the hardest job you ever had, because I think Flowonics was the hardest job that many people ever had in their entire life. Great problem.
Well, I have to be honest. I have tried to block that portion of my career out. I wake up with night terrors about that role and what we tried to accomplish there.
Yeah.
That was something
Yeah.
else.
For those who don't know, Flowonics was an implantable drug pump company that developed a competitive product to Medtronic's intrathecal pump. And it was loaded with pain management drugs, and that had never been attempted before. And so you guys were attempting to do great things.
Yep.
company doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. Or
I don't think so either. And it's a shame
Mhm.
because the the product was in many ways superior to what had been out
Mhm.
there with the Medtronic device.
Yeah.
It was just, it's a tough space to break into when you're competing against um, a company as large and powerful and just a machine like Medtronic.
Mhm.
And I have nothing but respect for Medtronic. I competed with them for almost 20 years. They they set the pace
Yeah.
in my space for a long
Yeah.
time.
And you were close with Dr. Buck too, I think, right?
Yep.
Another,
Angie and I are good friends. Tim Deere and I are good friends.
yeah.
And managing those KOLs is always it's always interesting. It's very similar to what I do now,
Yeah.
actually.
And I'm, for the audience's benefit, I'm not wandering aimlessly through Andrew's career. He's indulging me, but I want you to really understand when we put these names out here, these are nationally respected, internationally respected physicians. So Andrew he's an interesting subject to me because he had established himself in a very difficult space that is very lucrative, driven by technology, just an incredibly innovative space, and had done really, really well at cultivating relationships and driving sales and performance. But then you decided to transition into wealth management, sort of when you were at a really great place in your career in medical devices. Tell us about that. Did you have a knack for reading stock reports? Were you in your spare time kind of going through company profiles? What was this all about?
No, it was definitely not the ability to read stock
Okay.
reports. I do that at night when I need to sleep. Jordan, I had, excuse me, I was at a place in my life and in my career that I felt like I needed a change. I was going through a divorce at the time. I had almost 1,000 chronic pain patients that had my cell phone number. And many of your listeners who weren't in neuromodulation or spinal cord stimulation probably wouldn't understand back in the day, as old guys like me say, we worked at the prescription of the physician. He rarely knew what we were doing.
Mhm.
And I was literally delivering energy using anodes and cathodes into the spinal cord of these patients and trying to create paresthesias that would block their pain signals. Um, and, you know, Chronic pain was an interesting space. Oftentimes, by the time they get to an implantable device, people have quit listening to their complaints. People have quit listening to their struggles. And so when they get a representative like me, they knew I had to answer the phone.
Mhm.
So my job became equal parts um, med device specialist and
Yeah.
psychologist. So you would just have to listen. And there came a point where it just wasn't worth it for me anymore. I felt great about what I did. I helped a lot of people. It was fulfilling. It was obviously lucrative from a financial standpoint, but there's only so much Andrew to go around, and I think I had spent most of it. So I had a great friend who founded our firm here, and we we talked in the gym. We talked over drinks, and he was interested in my sales and marketing background and coming into his new organization. And it was just it was the scariest thing I've ever done. But I went literally from making a very good living to $0 overnight,
Mhm.
and it's turned out just incredibly well. I can't. I would never have dreamed that I'd be sitting where I am today.
Yeah. It's a fantastic story. And, tell us about the transition to Meridian Wealth Management. Dive a little deeper there for us because, I know when I started this business, I couldn't sleep probably for 2 weeks straight, just no base salary, no benefits, young children. There was just a lot of dark nights of the soul, if you will. And I can't imagine that it sounds like you had some of that as also. And then you have a voice in your ear of a medical device recruiter that keeps trying to drag you back into the game. Well, that was me. who was sure you'd come back to this industry. So tell us about that, because I think, in talking to reps over the years who want to do something else but don't know how to do that or what that would be like to go through, give us a little picture into your, psychology there as you made that transition, because that had to be hard.
It was really hard, Jordan, and it was scary. It's funny, device reps as a whole, we tend to spend a lot of money. So I didn't realize my lifestyle was, I was
Yeah.
rolling. I was feeling pretty good about myself, and so when I stepped away, um, uh, it was terrifying but exhilarating to start,
Mhm.
and then the exhilarating went away, and I was just terrified. I didn't know how, I had my savings, but I was watching that deplete on a monthly basis, and it was really it was gut check time for me after a few
Mhm.
months because in this business, money works on its own
Yeah.
time, and I always tell uh, new financial advisors make a list of the 50 people you are positive are going to do business with you, and you might get
Mhm.
three. Financial discussions are intimate, they're difficult, and you have to establish trust. So for years, I had to recreate myself in the minds of the people in my community and in my social circle, and that was not easy. And I I don't know if I'm stubborn or I'm just not very bright, but I just wasn't going to give
Mhm.
up. So I just kept slogging away, and um, it, again, I don't know why I lasted. I always answered your phone calls because I had a foot in each bucket, thinking maybe I've made a mistake. But I will say this: the training we get in med device, it's the best in the world.
Mhm.
The from the sales training to how to present a marketing piece to business planning, all of the things that med device reps take for granted that they're asked to do and that they become very good at, it translates, and and it translates in a big way. And you come into a space that, like wealth management, where there's not a lot of
Mhm.
that. There's not a lot of gregarious characters, or the funny guy often isn't in this
Mhm.
industry, and that's certainly who I am.
Mhm.
I'm a relationship guy at heart, and that you know that in large part led me away from that transactional nature of med device. You make President's Club in December, and in February you're getting called to the carpet because you missed your number in January, and you don't even have your quota by the time that you're having that discussion with your manager. So again, that's a little bit of a sidebar, but
Yeah.
that always cracked me
It's
up.
very high stakes, right? And
Yep.
that's what I
Right.
always tell people in this industry or that want to get in is it's a trapeze act. You're on a wire,
Yes.
and I am on a wire in my business too. And um, maybe not to the same degree you were, but it feels like it. And going from that adrenaline, just a lot of people in our niche are adrenaline junkies, into wealth management. Was that hard for you, or is there a different
Oh,
form of adrenaline in what you do?
it was, well, it was very difficult because you come in into the wealth management space, and it's almost like you're actively waiting for the phone to ring sometimes. Whereas your your activities in med device, especially when you had a mature territory like Matt and I
Mhm.
did, you're in the OR, which always is an adrenaline boost. You're dealing with these KOLs. You're dealing with contracts and formulary, and changing comp plans, all these different things where it's just there's shots fired every
Mhm.
day. And it was exciting, and you like that part of it. If you're Most good reps, I'd say, would admit quietly that they enjoy the
Mhm.
chaos. So coming into this space where you had to be so methodical. There was so much learning to do. I had to get licensed and test. It was like learning a brand new language. The and it's basically a law exam. The Series 65 is basically a law exam, and so I was drinking from a fire hose while not making any money, um, not having too many people that I could call and ask for the favor of hey, give me a shot,
Mhm.
and so I think the business planning aspect of what I learned under Paul Hanchin at A&S, who is still my guru. I still talk to Paul regularly, the finest leader that I've ever worked for. I worked for some good ones and I worked for some bad ones, and he was easily the best. But that business planning was what really got me through.
Yeah.
I had the I had a blueprint. I had activities that I had to adhere to, and then you just have to have so much faith in the delayed gratification that is not unlike med device. In many ways, they're parallel
Yeah. Yeah.
roles.
Give us a snapshot of Meridian Wealth Management. Who are you guys? What do you do? How big are you? How much assets do you manage? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that I love answering that question. Our founder, Greg Couch, was at Raymond James, and he left there because it was more of a broker situation where he didn't necessarily like sitting in a Monday meeting having someone tell him what products he needed to sell to clients during the week because that was the most
Mm.
lucrative. He steps away, starts an independent registered advisory firm. And we do act. We're a fee only advisory firm, and we act so that causes us to have to act as a fiduciary, and we love that. We are completely aligned with our clients. Started with a couple $100 million assets under management, and now we're at 4.2 billion. We have 11 offices in 6 states. We are actively in the mergers and acquisitions phase of our growth. I was on the West Coast last week with Greg. We were in Monterey, California, and then in Scottsdale for some meetings. But again, started small. Growth was slow for a while, and then organically, and then industry wide, the pendulum started to shift from the brokerage commission based products more toward the fiduciary capacity that we are so proud of. We are an independent advisory firm, meaning we don't have any soft dollar arrangements. We don't have any proprietary funds. We have the entire investment universe
Mhm.
that we can invest in for our clients. I guess you could say we're a little boutiquey. We don't take all comers. We interview our clients as much as they interview
Mhm.
us because of the intimate nature of the financial and retirement wealth management world. We don't like turnover. We don't want our clients to leave, so we make sure that they're happy with us and that we're happy with them.
Mhm.
Uh, Many of your device reps that are listening to this right now will understand the joy I take in picking and choosing who I partner with, meaning my clients, because we've all had to hold our nose and deal with those physicians or facilities that we know are doing the wrong things, but we're being forced to work with them. So my independence and the autonomy that I have to do business the way I see fit, man, you talk about a whole new world and a breath of fresh
Yeah.
air.
That's great. That's great. It's got to feel like freedom. Just got to feel like
Oh,
freedom.
total freedom. And you know, we won't trash anybody on here, but I got tired of holding my nose, so I was glad to step away from that part of
Yeah.
it.
Break down for us, and I'm sure a lot of people know, but maybe a lot of people don't know. What does a wealth management advisor do? So if I show up at your office and say, "Hey, I want to talk to Andrew," and take me through what your job looks like.
That can mean a lot of different things. And I'll say this: people get scared off by the term wealth management. Wealth could be, $100 million, or it could be
Mhm.
$100. So sometimes people think, well, I don't have enough money to see a wealth management advisor, and nothing could be further from the truth. My typical client, my average client, is me. I'm 52 years old. My average client's 51 with X amount of dollars of investable assets. Most of them are med device reps, business owners, and physicians. That's kind of who I specialize in, as you can probably understand why. That is my niche space. Um, what we really do is try to provide clarity to our clients in their financial future. So many of your listeners and me before I changed careers, I didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
plan. I knew I was investing in my 401k, but was I maxing it out? Was I receiving the full match from my company? Was I on track for retirement? Was I behind? Was I ahead? Did I have a financial plan that discussed my net worth and the goals that I had? What was my risk profile? And so much of what I do, Jordan, is just asking questions. Investor psychology is a very interesting space, and you arrive quickly if you ask and listen. Mostly what I do is listen, but if you ask those open-ended questions that we were taught so well in med device sales training, people will tell you what's important to them, whether it's protection of principal or aggressive growth or something more substantive, like I want to own a home in Naples, Florida, or I want to make sure that I leave a legacy for my grandchildren. And those are all questions that I need answers to. So a lot of what I do is develop relationships with people to where I can understand where they are and where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the management of money, to be honest, is the easy part of what we do. It is the management of expectations, the management of relationships. People, the money elicits passion and fear, and so just like when I was in device, my physicians would trust me to work at their prescription. This. I ask my clients now to let me be that trusted guide that can take you to where you want to go. So again, to kind of summarize all that, I ask a lot of questions, I listen a lot, and then we create a financial plan. We create a destination, and then we roadmap how we're going to get there.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we talked about a couple months ago when you called was around there's an optimal time for you to talk to a rep or a rep to talk to you is when they change companies and they have like a 401k rollover. Tell us about that
Right.
because I wanted to make sure we picked up on that in the conversation because it seems like that's a perfect segue for them to get introduced to something like you.
It really is, and we so many of us in device have jumped from job to job, or there's been an acquisition, and so you have two old 401ks, you have an IRA over here, different things like that. But when you are in transition, you have a retirement plan at a previous
Mm-hmm.
employer. That's the time that I want to talk to somebody, or a specific time, because you need to do something with that. You can leave it where it is, but very few do that. You can roll it into your new company
Mm-hmm.
401k if the plan document allows that, or in my world, we oftentimes, if everything is suitable, roll it into an IRA where we can manage it. That transition in employment is just it's the time where it is really good, a good time to look at your health insurance. What you're transitioning to with your new organization. What the new match is on your 401k. Is there a profit share? Things like that. And so it's when I said earlier, money works on its own time. Oftentimes, there is a defining moment or an event that will cause that money to be ready to
Mm-hmm.
move. Uh, Most people don't think about their 401k maybe once or twice a year until you're switching jobs or you're getting ready to
Yeah.
retire.
That was I can speak from my own personal experience. When I left Medtronic and then I left KCI and started this business, I met with a financial advisor and they said, You are way too heavily leveraged at Medtronic. This is actually scary. I've never seen anybody like this. I'm like, I wasn't thinking about it, you know. And they said, you know what would happen if something happened to Medtronic? I'm like, they're the bellwether. You know, nothing's ever going to happen to Medtronic. I am so
Right.
glad I listened to that financial advisor. I mean, when we're
Right.
talking years ago, but it was, he said, your risk profile is just way too high. And I think I'm not unique. I think a lot of people are in that position with a lot of companies.
Oh, 100%. I recently took a rep. He came to me and he had six different qualified retirement plans hanging out there. And he really had no clue what he
Yeah.
had. Three or four of them were still in the old 401k, which is, you're just trusting that particular plan to take care of you. I think he was in a bunch of target date funds, but he was heavily leveraged in a very concentrated holding with one of his previous companies, and it ended up we were able to take all six, consolidate them into one IRA, and his risk profile was basically 100%. It was
Yeah.
crazy, but he also didn't have any estate planning done. He had young kids. He didn't have any life insurance. He had nothing, and he didn't know.
Right.
People, we are not taught about wealth management in high school or college unless you go for, business or finance or economics. People don't know, and then they stick their head in the sand because they don't know. They don't want to talk
Yeah.
about it. And I think device reps have it more difficult than a lot of people
Hmm.
because of the evolving nature of what they do. One year they're killing it. The next year they're not. They've got the comp plans change, bonus structures change. It's always interesting. You make President's Club one year, they ask you for a 30% growth number the next year. Well, sometimes that's hard to do. So you go from being high on the hog to making peanuts, and
And there are some companies that are intentional about that. They would like you to
of
have a down
course,
year. I mean, it's just built in, and everybody knows that's part of the culture with that company. Is that you have an
yes.
up year, and then they punish you the next year, and you hang in there, and then your following year you might get back to their good graces, but they don't want this continuous upward trajectory. Some of them, I'll say.
I would think, from my experience, most of them don't want that. It's interesting how often the top performers are punished in certain organizations, and
More.
that was always frustrating to
Yeah.
me.
I
So
can't wait to talk to top performers that are being punished. And there are a lot of them out there, and I try to find all of
yeah.
them. This is fantastic conversation. I'm enjoying this a lot. What does a win look like in your world? I know what a win looks like in the medical device world. For you now in your role, um, you're still winning. You're still wanting to win. What does that look like? What do wins look like for wealth management advisors?
It's very different. Obviously, a- again, you know me well enough to know when I say I'm a relationship guy, I'm a
Mhm.
relationship guy. That's what floats my boat. That's what drives me. A win, obviously, there's a financial component. You want to do well, but a real win for me is that look, that aha moment when someone can say, "Okay, I get it." Um, or I get that phone call of, "Man, thank you so much. I'm sleeping better. My wife's happy."
Yeah.
Just that they have a plan. And I know that sounds cheesy. That sounds a little pie in the sky. But you know, I mentioned earlier the transactional nature of an implantable device. I got paid once, and then I was married to that patient with reprogrammings for the rest
Yeah.
of the life of the unit. This is this is something more intimate. What I do now, it's taking someone's financial future, what they've worked for their entire life, and hopefully making it better and giving them the opportunity to achieve their goals. And that's a special thing. Not a lot of people get to do
Hmm.
that. If you're selling a widget, if you're again, I've used the word transactional too much, but if it's just getting a PO and moving on, like a piece of capital equipment or something like that, not much fun. What I do is really building relationships, watching people succeed, watching people gain confidence in their financial future. And the way we're structured, and it's beautiful
Mhm.
because when my clients do better, I do
Yeah.
better. And that's what a win looks like.
Collect
Again,
a
what's that?
collective win together.
It is a collective win. Yes, it's interesting to watch. Um, it's almost when you're hiring an investment advisor or a wealth management advisor, there's this dating period that occurs where you're talking to three or four different guys, and then you realize, okay, I kind of like this guy. I think he knows what he's talking about, and then that taking it from that initial meeting, that initial conversation to we have a robust financial plan that has all of your information in there and you feel great about it.
Mhm.
That's a fun thing. And there are incremental wins along the way.
Yeah. Let's talk about there's a couple more things I want to hit before I let you go. One is you talked about life insurance and how you advise folks around that. Most reps working at companies have some kind of life insurance. Is that sufficient
Mhm.
typically in your experience, or is there another thing they ought to be thinking through, a component, additional component with that? Yeah.
It's so.
I only ask because I've had the personal experience of my father passing when I was 14, and we lost every
Oh,
single thing we had and moved into a trailer park.
yeah.
So tell us about that because I've been told, sometimes those company life insurance plans aren't exactly what you think they are when you're working for an employer.
Well, I would agree with that 100%. And rarely would I ever say anyone is fully insured, especially if you have a family, if you have younger children. You know, let's say you work for company A and you have X amount of life insurance, and restructuring occurs, and you're no longer with company A, you don't have life insurance anymore. And if you really do a needs analysis on the other hand, if you do a needs analysis about a rep with three kids who are, let's say, 5, 7, and 9,
Mhm.
right? They're going to end up going to college. The spouse, is going to have childcare costs, things like that. If something happens, would they be able to maintain their quality of living? Would they be able to stay in the house or move to a trailer park? Would they be able to go do the things that they, typically do? Most of the time, when you do a needs analysis, people will absolutely freak out. Um, Again, rarely do people have enough life insurance. Some people don't believe in insurance. You are a perfect example at 14 moving into a trailer park.
Mhm.
That's what can happen. And that's what does happen. Again, we always say a failure to plan is planning to fail. And with the inexpensive nature of life insurance for younger folks, the earlier that we can have that conversation, the better, because it is age and health dependent. And if you're a 30-some year old rep that is in pretty good shape, you're going to be spending pennies for the amount of life insurance that you need.
Yeah.
The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets because of mortality tables. We get older, that's when we're going to die.
Mhm.
But that's a passion project for me. We view everything we do here at Meridian through the lens of estate planning because it's so important. It is a situation where we watch families just get ripped apart through an unfortunate illness or car accident or whatever can happen, and it's just day to day life, and it's a scary thing when I know someone is severely underinsured.
Yeah. One other thing is we've seen a tremendous amount of change and upheaval and turnover in sales forces in a lot of big medical device players and small ones too, especially the last few years, right around the pandemic, but even before some of that was going on. How much of your discussions with your clients are around emergency funds or rainy day funds or, catastrophic job loss funds or things like that? Is that a discussion you guys get into as well?
100%. We oftentimes will discuss things like that in a bucket strategy. Do you have an emergency bucket? Do you have a bucket of money that you can spend, 6 months worth of your bills or or your essentials. We'll do a short term, long term, intermediate term bucket strategy, but that is something, yeah, definitively that is important. And, again, having lived that lifestyle and uh, been around, so many of my friends are still device reps. It's funny how often we spend almost every dollar we make, driving fancy cars, living in a big house, being a member at the golf club, wearing uh, expensive shoes.
Can I just say,
It,
I feel like that's an occupational hazard because
it is.
reps are working with physicians, and on the high end, if you're hanging out with neurosurgeons, they make so much money, and you almost feel like it's just part of what your job is to keep up with them. Is that?
100%. It's keeping up with Dr. Jones.
Yeah.
And those were my buddies. And it
Mhm.
and it uh it, it can get away from you pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so when you have those conversations about making sure that we have a rainy day fund, we have an emergency fund. Sometimes you get the glazed look, and then you can kind of explain things. And to your point, we've seen so much consolidation, so many changes within the industry, and you don't know. My brother's been downsized twice in device in the last 3 years,
Yeah.
just out of nowhere. And so I've seen it personally. Luckily, he listens to me, and he was able to
He's ready.
to
Yeah.
withstand the storm. But that is a real thing. I'm really glad you asked that question. And if your listeners don't do anything else other than get life insurance and save a little bit of money for a rainy day, then this will be a successful call.
Absolutely. Okay, one forward-looking question. What do you think is, you're a future guy, as you look down the horizon, what is something that you think in the next 5 to 10 years, and that may be too long term, but what should medical reps be planning for now that you think is going to affect them in the next 5 to 10 years? What's out there? Or what's
Well,
looming, maybe? I don't want to be ominous, but what do you think's looming?
Well, there's always when you're in wealth management, something's always looming.
Yeah.
In the back of your mind, there's always a dark gray cloud that you
Yeah.
see coming, and so that's one of the reasons we plan the way we do. That's one of the reasons we diversify our portfolios as extensively as we do. We try not to get overly saturated into one particular sector or holding things like that.
Yeah.
Jordan, to be honest with you, in the world of finance, there's a science to it.
Hmm.
It's called modern portfolio theory. We kind of adhere to that. So there's part art, part science. The art is the more difficult part.
Yeah.
Um, but in regard to 10 years down the road, I just want everyone to realize that um, the more you save now, through the power of compounding, 10 years is going to look way different.
Hmm.
And that delayed gratification is going to matter.
Yeah.
I don't want to make any bold proclamations that we're going to go through another financial crisis or a housing crisis or another banking issue. I don't see any of that on the future, but with the world in turmoil like it is,
Hmm.
you've got Israel, Hamas, you've got Ukraine, Russia, you've got the shadow war we're in with China.
Hmm.
You know, so many things that could happen um, that we certainly hope do not. But you better be saving for a rainy day. And if your listeners can find someone that they trust that can put a plan on paper that is a living, breathing document
Yeah.
that they don't just file away like we did in device in January and get it back out, dust it off in December and say, oh, that
Hmm.
didn't really follow this very well. No, if and I know I'm rambling a bit, but it's that one's important to
Yeah.
me.
Hmm.
Just the start now,
Yeah.
save as much as you can, and because you don't know what's coming down the pike.
To your point, is it too late for someone that's a year out from retirement to call you and
No,
talk? Okay.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Some folks think it's too late. Some folks think they don't have enough money. Some folks think, that's not for me. And whether it's me or someone else, just having that trusted guide who can help you establish, some just knowing where you are.
Yeah.
Not necessarily where you're going, but knowing where you are, having a true snapshot of your financial picture. I would say 90% of Americans have no idea, really, on paper,
What they have.
where they are financially.
Mhm. That's great. Well, we'll close on that. Andrew, we're going to link to Meridian in the show notes when we post this. I really encourage our listeners who have been jolted maybe by this conversation to reach out to Andrew. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us from medical device to where you are now, and applying that drive and relationship focus in this new context. I encourage you, audience, reach out to Andrew. He knows what he's doing. Thanks for being
Jordan, I appreciate it. I've had a good time talking with you, and I hope your audience, if they're just listening, you need to understand how good Jordan's hair actually is.
Hey, it's still all in place. It's getting a little spotty up here and there.
Oh, no, no, no.
No
Listen,
plugs. No
look at this. I'm jealous.
plugs. My brother and I go back and forth on that too, because he's going bald the way our dad did, which is from back to front.
Yeah.
And he's gonna.
Yeah.
I mean, I will too eventually, but I'm gonna keep the ring as long as we're
Fight the fight, brother.
George Jefferson
Fight the fight.
up in there. So, anyways, thank you for being on, Andrew. It really is great connecting with you. Thanks for listening to the Chase MedSearch podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Be sure to visit our website at chasemedsearch.com and drop a resume. That way you never miss a job opportunity. And please subscribe to our YouTube platform, even if you like to consume the content